The Golden Age of Islam began in the 8th century, and it was a time when the Islamic world became a beacon of prosperity, knowledge, and innovation. It was an age that saw the blossoming of science, literature, medicine, philosophy, and art, all under the guardianship of rulers who sought not only political power, but also intellectual dominance. At the heart of this golden era stood the city of Baghdad, a city that rose from the sands of Mesopotamia to become one of the greatest centers of learning the world had ever known. Founded by the Abbasid Caliphs, Baghdad grew into a magnificent city that eventually held nearly 1 million inhabitants. Its streets bustled with merchants, travelers, poets, and scientists. Its libraries overflowed with manuscripts brought from every corner of the known world. At the very heart of this intellectual hub was the House of Wisdom, known in Arabic as Bait al-Hikmah. It was the jewel of Baghdad, a place where the wisdom of past civilizations was translated, preserved, and expanded. Greek works on philosophy, mathematics, and medicine were carefully studied and improved upon. Indian advancements in numbers and astronomy were examined and adopted. Persian traditions of governance and culture blended with Arab and Islamic thought. Scholars from across Asia, Africa, and Europe flocked to this city eager to exchange ideas and participate in a new dawn of civilization. For nearly 5 centuries, Baghdad symbolized the triumph of knowledge over ignorance. The Abbasid Caliphs took pride in sponsoring scholars, scientists, artists, and physicians. They invited thinkers regardless of faith or background to contribute to the flourishing of knowledge. It was common to see Christian scholars working side by side with Muslim mathematicians or Jewish physicians debating with Arab astronomers. This cosmopolitan culture allowed the Islamic world to surge ahead in discovery. Innovations in algebra, optics, medicine, and cartography flourished here, and many of these discoveries later laid the foundations for the European Renaissance, centuries afterward. Truly, the golden age of Islam was a sight to behold, but as history has shown time and time again, every height is followed by decline. What rose so gloriously in Baghdad would eventually be brought crashing, down by forces from the distant steppes of Mongolia. The Abbasid Caliphate was the third great Islamic caliphate to rule after the Prophet Muhammad. The Abbasids seized power from the Umayyads in the mid-8th century, claiming legitimacy from their descent through Abbas, an uncle of the Prophet. They established Baghdad as their capital and built it into a marvel of urban design and administration. The empire stretched from North Africa to Persia, covering vast and diverse lands. For centuries, they maintained dominance over the Muslim world, despite occasional internal struggles. Yet power is never eternal, and by the 13th century, the Abbasids had grown weaker both militarily and politically. Their influence was more symbolic than practical. Many regions of the Muslim world were effectively autonomous, though they still recognized the spiritual authority of the Caliph in Baghdad. This weakness would become all too apparent when they faced the wrath of a new power sweeping across Asia, a power unlike anything the Islamic world had ever seen before: the Mongols. The Mongols were not a settled people like the Abbasids. They were nomadic horsemen of the steppes. Hardened by the unforgiving climates of Central Asia, they moved constantly with their herds, relying on mobility, speed, and fearsome discipline in battle. To their enemies, the Mongols were a nightmare incarnate. They had perfected tactics that relied on terror and deception. They would storm into villages, creating such panic that resistance often collapsed before a real fight even began. Tales of their cruelty spread far and wide. Entire cities were burned to the ground and their inhabitants slaughtered. The Mongols offered surrender before battle, but if this was rejected, they responded with merciless destruction. It was these tactics that had made them so feared that even the construction of the Great Wall of China centuries earlier had been to keep people like them at bay. Under their legendary leader Genghis Khan, born as Temujin, the Mongols were united into one unstoppable war machine. They surged outward, conquering China, Central Asia, and Persia. And after Genghis, his descendants carried forth his vision of expansion. By the mid-13th century, his grandson Hulagu Khan set his eyes upon Baghdad. Hulagu was ruthless, ambitious, and determined. His campaigns brought him into conflict with a Shiite sect known as the Assassins, who had terrorized the Middle East for decades through political killings and covert strikes. Hulagu crushed them, removing one of the great threats of the era. With that obstacle eliminated, Hulagu turned toward the Abbasid Caliphate. By this time, the Abbasids were shadows of their former selves. Their armies were weak and underfunded, their political power fractured. Baghdad still glittered with wealth and knowledge, but its defenses were hollow. Caliph al-Mustasim underestimated the danger he faced. He believed that Baghdad's prestige and its place as the heart of the Muslim world would rally armies from across Islam to defend it. He also trusted the word of his Grand Vizier, who some believed had his own grudges against the Caliph and may have even encouraged the Mongols. Whether this betrayal was real or imagined, it did nothing to prepare Baghdad for what was coming. Hulagu sent letters to al-Mustasim demanding surrender. The Caliph dismissed them arrogantly, telling Hulagu to return to where he came from or face the wrath of Baghdad and the greater Muslim world. But no help came. No massive armies of Islam gathered to defend the Abbasids. Baghdad was isolated. In January of 1258, the Mongols arrived outside the walls of Baghdad with an army that dwarfed anything the Caliph could muster. The siege began. Mongol engineers constructed siege engines, catapults, and battering rams with precision and skill. The Abbasid defenders could do little to resist. The walls crumbled and panic spread. After only days, al-Mustasim realized his mistake and pleaded for negotiations, but Hulagu would not forgive arrogance. He had offered surrender once and it had been refused. There would be no second chance. On February 10th, al-Mustasim unconditionally surrendered. For 3 days there was eerie silence. The people of Baghdad waited in dread, not knowing what fate awaited them. On February 13th, the storm broke. The Mongols entered the city. Hulagu spared only the Nestorian Christians of Baghdad, instructing them to lock themselves in their churches. His mother and wife were Christians, and he sought to honor them. Everyone else was left at the mercy of Mongol soldiers. The massacre began. For days, the streets of Baghdad ran with blood. Nobles, scholars, soldiers, and commoners alike were slaughtered. The death toll remains uncertain, but estimates range from 90,000 to over 1 million souls. 3,000 nobles alone were executed. The city was burned and pillaged. Palaces crumbled, mosques were desecrated, and markets destroyed. The fate of Caliph al-Mustasim remains a subject of grim debate. Some accounts say he was locked in a room with his treasures mocked by Hulagu to eat of his gold if he loved it so much until he starved to death. Other accounts claim Hulagu feared that spilling royal blood on the soil of Baghdad would bring disaster. Instead, he had al-Mustasim rolled in a rug and trampled by horses until he was dead. However he died, the last Abbasid Caliph of Baghdad perished with his city. The golden age of Islam was buried with him. Perhaps the most tragic loss of all was not the people, but the knowledge. The Mongols gathered the countless manuscripts of the House of Wisdom and the other great libraries of Baghdad and hurled them into the Tigris River. So many books were destroyed that eyewitnesses claimed the waters ran black with ink after, running red with blood. Centuries of knowledge vanished in days. Works of philosophy, mathematics, medicine, astronomy, and poetry that had no equal in the world were lost forever. The House of Wisdom, which had once been the brightest light of learning, was gone, reduced to ash and silence. The fall of Baghdad in 1258 was more than just the collapse of a city or the death of a dynasty. It was the end of an era for the entire world. The golden age of Islam had propelled humanity forward, giving us algebra advancements in medicine, refined maps, and translations of ancient texts that would later inspire Renaissance thinkers. Its destruction set back global learning in ways that can never fully be measured. A bridge between civilizations was burned, and countless opportunities for progress were lost. For the Muslim world, it was a humiliation that shattered unity. For the rest of the world, it was a calamity that erased knowledge we will never regain. And yet, even in tragedy, history teaches lessons. The story of Baghdad is a reminder that no civilization, no matter how advanced or prosperous, is invincible. The Abbasids grew complacent and believed prestige alone would protect them. They ignored the warnings and paid the price. At the same time, the memory of what Baghdad once was continues to inspire. Though the House of Wisdom is gone, its spirit lives on in the legacy of ideas and discoveries that survived the flames and spread through other lands. Without Baghdad, Europe may never have had the intellectual foundations that fueled the Renaissance. Without Baghdad, much of the ancient wisdom of Greece. India and Persia may have vanished long before, reaching modern times. Today, when we look back at the fall of Baghdad, we see both the brilliance of human potential and the fragility of human achievement. We see how knowledge can build empires, but also how arrogance and division can destroy them.